Sebastian Ebel said it will no longer be possible to find last-minute bargains as demand significantly outstrips supply. But is he right? Well, I've been talking to the travel correspondent of The Independent, Simon Calder, and Julia Bue-Said, Chief Executive of the Advantage Travel Partnership. And I began by asking Simon what he thought of Sebastian Ebel's statement.
Well, I hate to go he would say that, wouldn't he? But he would say that, and he does have some justification. So just to put this into perspective, TUI being Europe's biggest holiday company, doing pretty well after everybody in the travel industry, especially Julia Bue-Said's excellent members in Advantage, have had a dreadful, dreadful time. But now at least the big operators, the big holiday companies like TUI, are absolutely cashing in. And looking at this really interesting story in the Times, I think to some extent it's been taken as a bit of the kind of continuation of the narrative from Ryanair that the era of cheap flights is over, which I noted just before I booked my next Ryanair cheap flight. And it's actually much more to do with the undoubted shortage of accommodation in a number of our favourite locations across the Mediterranean this summer. So, as always, if you are confined to school holidays, either because you've got annoying children who are at school or because you work in education, then you're going to be paying an awful lot and you're not going to have much choice. But otherwise, you can be fairly relaxed and know that you're going to get a fairly good deal.
Julia, what do you make of this pronouncement that the era of ultra cheap flights is over?
Well, I hate to say I agree with Simon, but actually I do really, because what we tend to find is if you're having to travel in school holidays, flights will always be more expensive. Generally, the closer you book to departure, it's always more expensive, particularly if you're looking to book during the peak summer months. But if you're looking to travel out of season, then arguably you are still going to find some relatively affordable prices. Having a look now, if you want to travel beginning of June, you can get flights with Ryanair for £25. I mean, that's pretty affordable. So I think the era, it depends on what you quantify as ultra low. I think in the next couple of years, we're certainly going to see, still going to have an abundance of great offers, affordable travel, particularly if you can travel out of season.
Having said that, if you don't mind me interrupting briefly, there's an awful lot of people who will be listening to this, Carol, shouting at their radio saying, what are they talking about? Cheap holidays still available. I've just paid twice or maybe even 3 times what I paid last time for example, a trip to Florida for the family. There are also an awful lot of very high prices around, which are mostly to do with long haul travel. But the travel industry is certainly making up for lost sales during COVID, and probably who can blame it? But it's pretty tough for a lot of families.
Yeah, Julia, I mean, a lot of people listening will have to stick to the school holidays. They'll be looking for family holidays. And overall, prices do seem to have gone up quite significantly, perhaps also because the pound's still not particularly strong, is it?
Absolutely. And I think there are just a number of underlying, points to make on this. I think, underlying, notwithstanding, the last couple of years, as Simon mentioned, trading was zero at some point. So clearly businesses are trying to recoup some business back or some profit back. However, not to the extent where, anybody is trying to rip off consumers. And that's generally, a really important point. I think what we are seeing, underlying costs for everybody have increased. Rising fuel costs, they are clear. And I think there is a distinction here between Europe and long haul. Certainly if you look transatlantic, we haven't seen, all the flights return, the flight lift return that was there pre-pandemic. And demand does drive the pricing, and we're seeing significant demand, particularly across the pond, and that's causing the prices to really rocket. If you look at Europe, and certainly from our members, if you look at the peak summer travel for summer holidays, we're seeing anything between 20 and 30% increase in pricing. But I have to say, for a lot of families, if you haven't booked already, you are likely to find that prices will be higher for this summer, for peak summer months. Booking in advance, particularly for the busy months, is so important, particularly if you're after a package holiday.
Yes, Simon, I mean, what about the advantages of a package holiday over DIY? I mean, I'm looking ahead to going to Albania in September, and there seem to be some fantastic deals on both flights and hotels. Obviously, it's a lot more faff if you've got to try and plan each bit of it yourself. But do you think that despite what the boss of TUI is saying, even if you've got to travel in the peak season, you could be better off trying to cadge around and find where the deals are yourself?
Well, look, in a shock agreement with Julia Bue-Said of Advantage, I absolutely endorse the principle that the best way to book any holiday is through a human travel agent with a proper package holiday company, because that way you have both expertise and gold-plated consumer protection. Now, Carol, I happen to know that you are actually a very, very experienced and expert traveller, and you will be able to get to somewhere, Albania, which is not yet on the mainstream package holiday map, although I'm hugely excited to say that it almost is, because from the end of this month, TUI, of course, whose ultimate chief executive was saying how prices are going up, TUI is for the first time sending package holiday flights in from Gatwick and Manchester to North Macedonia, to the beautiful UNESCO-listed town of Ohrid. And actually, a lot of people who go there think, oh, this is an absolutely beautiful lake. Let's go round it. And they will actually end up going through Albanian territory and no doubt have a very, very lovely time there. Now, Albania will be on the mainstream package holiday map, but you are doing two things: going somewhere which is a little bit off-piste, if I may, and furthermore, you are going there in September, where you can basically just say, okay, who's going to give me the best possible deal? And you're going to have a wonderful time there. It's actually a lovely time to be anywhere in the Adriatic or the wider Mediterranean, because the sea is at its warmest in September. So
well,
hats off to you.
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to that. But without talking too much about my holiday plans, Julia, what sort of trends are you seeing now that international travel is finally back? We've actually had the officially declared end of the global pandemic. Are you finding that families generally want to go back, get a nice package holiday somewhere in the sun where they can relax with the kids? Or are people a bit more adventurous?
Well, I think when we talk, it's a bit of both, actually. And I think what we're seeing is you can be adventurous with a package holiday. And by a package holiday, let's forget the 1970s and, just going to the Costas and, fly and flop, as we used to call it. But let's think about book an adventure holiday with all your flights and accommodation in one go. And therefore you have peace of mind. You have everything you need for that holiday booked at the one time. And as Simon mentioned, financial protection, and it's all financially protected. Book through a travel agent who can give you the expert advice. And that's our idea of a package nowadays. A package has moved on so much, and you can get extremely competitive pricing with booking it all together at the same time as well. So, but certainly what we are seeing is, without question, families, couples, every age demographic are desperate to continue traveling. The bug is back. The bug of travel is back. People have missed out on so much, and pricing in general terms, we are not seeing that slow down any demand. And we're certainly not seeing any cost of living crisis have any impact on people's desire to want to get away. Best-selling destinations at the moment are the Canary Islands. They top the leaderboard week after week. Greece firmly behind that. What is interesting, however, people right now, despite, my advice in terms of booking early, about 25% of everything we're seeing is being booked within 10 to 12 weeks of travel. There is, and that's getting that timeline is broadening slightly as people start to think about, the autumn and summer. But we're seeing a lot more people thinking about booking at the last minute, pretty much at the last minute. And that's probably just getting over some of the COVID impacts. Some people may be feeling a bit anxious. But certainly the appetite to travel is really growing, and we're not seeing that slow down at all.
And Simon, if people are trying to think of somewhere to go over the summer. They are conscious that all the costs have gone up. And of course, a lot of people are struggling with the cost of living problems that we've got here. Where else would you advise them, or what else would you advise them if they're looking for a decent family break?
Well, some people will remember the Iron Curtain, and basically it is simply a matter of going anywhere which was to the east of that. So absolutely the best family destination in July and the first half of August is the Polish Riviera. You've got basically mile after mile of fantastic beaches. In particular, you can get really cheap flights because it's not a mainstream holiday destination into Gdansk, 20 minutes on the train to the lovely resort of Sopot, and you're going to get extraordinary value there. More widely, well, there's a few numbers I'm going to throw at you. Sorry to bring things down just a little bit at the end, but first of all, you've got the interesting situation where IATA, the world's kind of airline association, says capacity is still 21% down on what it was pre-COVID in 2019, the best of all possible years for the air traveller, and that's keeping prices high. British Airways have said last week, or their parent company, yeah, we're going to be making 2 billion euros at least this financial year, and that's because we're charging people loads of money. That wasn't their exact phrasing, but that was exactly what they meant. COVID restrictions, they haven't all gone yet, and still until Friday you will not be able to fly to the US unless you've been fully vaccinated. And in the room, if I may, is China, where they are still blocking international tourists, and more to the point, they are also not operating anything like the same number of pre-COVID flights that they were, which put loads and loads of capacity in for Southeast Asia, for Australia, for New Zealand at the lowest possible fares, and that helped everybody's prices to come down. Once they get back in the game, things are going to look a lot better. And so certainly I'm hoping to get to Australia at the end of this year, but I won't be booking my flights just yet.
Well, very best of luck with that, Simon. Just finally and briefly, if you could, Julia, what would be your top destination tip then, given the constraints that Simon has outlined there?
If we're talking about this summer, on top of the ones that kind of Simon would have outlined there, I'd certainly look at Turkey. I mean, Turkey has some phenomenal destinations. You know, they have such a breadth of products. There is still a lot of capacity out there. You know, even doing some quick searching now for August, you can still get away for £500 per person in the peak summer months at a beautiful hotel. So there are offers to be had. There is still availability to be had. But we said it at the start, and yes, I would, but, you know, consulting with an expert travel agent who can really help. They're looking at these every day. They are looking at availability day in, day out, and they know the best offers for their customers. But Turkey, Bulgaria, any of those destinations are coming up with some great availability and offers for, particularly for school children, for school holiday families that are looking for school holidays.
Julia Bue-Said of Advantage Travel Partnership and travel guru Simon Calder speaking to me just a little earlier here on Times Radio.